This is Zach again from Feel Free to Argue. Thanks for dropping by my channel. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about, well, the complete disintegration of Iraqi society. In the previous video, which this one is a response to, we looked at this figure of 1.1 million excess civilian Iraqi deaths due to the occupation. Let's try to put this figure in a bit of context, because it's hard when you sling all these numbers around to get an idea of just what this means in terms of Iraqi society. So we know that the original figure for the Lancet study, 650,000, represented 2.5% of the total Iraqi population. When we look at the further number of 1.1 million, using the same frame of reference to start from, we get a comparative number now of 4.23% of Iraqi society that is represented in this total. When we take that same percentage and we apply it to the U.S. population, we get a total of 12 million dead in the United States. So in rough terms, this would be the equivalent of the death of every single man, woman, and child in the state of Illinois, our fifth most populous state. But I think you can get into trouble just thinking about the deaths and thinking that, okay, these people have died and that's all that's going wrong in Iraq right now. The problem is actually so much worse than that. Let's look first, for example, at the unemployment statistics that are coming out of Iraq. According to the Iraq government, this is the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, or MLSA, they put the unemployment rate in Iraq at 60%. Now, compare this against the U.S. unemployment rate during the Great Depression, which averaged 18.2% and spiked in the 30s. So what Iraq is going through in terms of unemployment is over twice and frequently 3 times as high as what we experienced during the Great Depression. But let's look at some other figures, because there are all kinds of things going wrong in Iraq, and there are all kinds of indicators that you can use to see the complete disintegration of Iraqi society. Let's talk first about the number of people who are displaced. Most expert opinions on the number of displaced Iraqis, refugees, put the number at around between 2 and 2.5 million internally and the same number externally, meaning people who are not in their original houses in Iraq, who have no way, in many cases, of getting back to their original house. And then there are also all the people who have simply fled the country because of the massive lawlessness. Let me emphasize that most of the people who are evaluating the refugee crisis think that it's the upper crust of Iraqi society, the doctors, the lawyers, the administrators, who are leaving the country. So aside from that, we have, once again, this is, I think, a low figure, but we have estimates from various people of 3 million wounded Iraqis. Now, once again, because of the almost complete destruction of the Iraqi healthcare infrastructure and the low availability of medicines and poor distribution networks for the distribution of even the medicines that they do have, you can generally assume that most of these 3 million Iraqis are suffering with virtually no health care. None of the things that they need to get better, or in many cases even stay alive. When you add to these the reports from Oxfam in July of 2007 talking about how you have 4 million Iraqis in urgent need of immediate humanitarian assistance. Now, these people are broken out from the refugees. The Oxfam report talks separately about the refugee crisis and the people who are in Iraq who who have immediate need of humanitarian assistance. When we talk about humanitarian assistance and these people being in dire need, what are we talking about? Well, the Iraq report from Oxfam says that 43% of the Iraqi population is living in what they term absolute poverty. Now, this needs to be distinguished from quaint notions that we have in the West of poverty, because when we talk about poverty in the UK or the United States or Canada, what we're talking about, generally speaking, is not people who are at risk of starvation. We're talking about people who can't participate in the society at what we've determined to be arbitrarily an acceptable level. This is called relative poverty. In other words, your relative position to the other people in the society is unfair. But when they talk about absolute poverty, this is another level beyond relative poverty. This is saying that these people are missing essential things that they require for continued existence. Let's look at what the Oxfam report talks about. When it talks about humanitarian needs, it's talking about things such as food, shelter, water, and sanitation. And when you get into the details of the report, you can see just how horrific a lot of these things are. Child malnutrition has increased to 28% from 19% before the occupation. Iraqis without adequate water are up from 50% in 2003 to 70%. And a total of, this is probably the most mind-blowing statistic for me, 80% of Iraqis lack effective sanitation. Now, I know these are a lot of figures, but I think what they do point to is a complete disintegration in Iraqi society. Look, for example, just total up these numbers. You have between 4 and 5 million people who are displaced internally and externally. You have 3 million people who are wounded. You have 1 million people who are excess civilian deaths due to the occupation. You have 4 million people who are in urgent, desperate need of the very basic elements of survival, food, shelter, water. And when you add all of these figures together, you see that half, 1 in 2 of the Iraqi people are either in extreme misery or dead. This is an untenable situation. And if we're wondering why there's a resistance, why 60% of the Iraqi people think that attacks on coalition forces are okay, it's because we are presiding over a complete disintegration of their society. Whatever you've been told in the mainstream media about how the surge is going and about how we're rebuilding Iraqi society is bunk. We need to get out and give Iraq back to the Iraqis. It's their country, and we're doing a terrible job of administering it.